Ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again with another Wuthering Waves 3.0 update. And this time, it's going to be a bit of a follow-up on the off-tune mechanic, where we've gotten a bit of an introductory overview. You can just look at the key updates page over here in-game, where you can get some details regarding it. But we haven't really gotten, like, the full nitty-gritty breakdown that really shows us, you know, a little bit more in-depth what's going on over here. Just a collection of previews. And so, it looks like Kuro Games has prepared something for us, and I wanted to use this document over here, this article detailing everything about the mechanic, as an opportunity to clarify some misinformation regarding it before it blossoms into something big. Because you know how misinformation spreads in the Wuthering Waves community, specifically. Kuro adds a new feature, understanding of that feature gets muddied, and Hoyoshills, whoever, somebody with an agenda in the gacha space proceeds to go ahead, mistranslate that mechanic, and equate it to something else. And I'm not going to go ahead, point any crazy fingers over here, say that people are doing some accusatory things, but statements like this, right, describing the mechanic as super break in Wuwa, that is something, in my opinion, especially when you know how it works in Honkai Star Rail, and when you know the restrictions that we've had from using the archetype in Honkai Star Rail, it's just something that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I just want to make sure that this little tidbit of misinformation is something that gets nipped in the bud before it even releases, so that when 3.0 launches, we don't have misinformation from this community of gamers over here, who you know the Honkai Star Rail community is itching for any opportunity to doom post, talk shit about any other game. Do you want to know why? Because this little bit is simple. Honkai Star Rail is currently in the worst stretch it's ever been in the history of the goddamn game, where they are delaying their version 3.8 update. They are delaying it by 2 additional weeks. And it is also shaping up to be one of the worst updates in the history of the game. And they're doing all of that and only giving you not even 10 pulls. Yeah, they're only giving you like 6 of them. So that's why I'm making sure to do this preamble over here, ladies and gentlemen. Do you want to know why? Because there are already Honkai Star Rail creators that are, let's be honest, they're preemptively already doing the doom posting that I'm talking. Hopefully you understand why I'm taking so many precautions at the start of this video at such a critical time in this stretch of the game. So with that out of the way, let's start breaking it all down and let's start looking at it. So the basic rules are something that you've likely seen before if you participated in the Tactical Simulacra event or seen the previous document for this that Kuro's released before, but it's going to be pretty simple. Every single character in the game, when they attack, is now going to build up this gauge on the side. You can see that shield over there. And once it reaches the limit, it fully fills up, they enter the mistuned state. And once they're in the mistuned state, you can unleash a powerful Tune Break attack that simply resets their level, deals additional damage, and when they have their level reset, ladies and gentlemen, it can't be built up again for a short period of time. If you actually know how Anomaly works in Zenless Zone Zero, this is a very, very, very similar sort of implementation. And if we're being entirely honest over here, if you told me that Off-Tune was like a, you know, a copy of Anomaly, I'd actually be way more in the boat of what you're trying to say. Makes a lot more sense here. Tune Break skill. For powerful enemies, once their off-tune level is full, Resonators must cast a Tune Break skill to deal Tune Break damage to enemies in the missed state. And this is where, ladies and gentlemen, the real differentiation actually occurs in gameplay between Wuthering Waves, Zenless Zone Zero, and Honkai Star. This break ability is manually triggered by the player. You actively decide with a button prompt when to actually break this enemy. And that has so many more layers of actual strategic depth, so many more layers of decision making and actual combat that forces a level of differentiation from a turn-based game where you can't skip turns. Your characters either have to attack or they have to use a skill. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, you can't really decide very well or very, like, with a lot of agency. You can't decide when to really break an enemy. And the end result is that every single person on your team ends up with the ability to deal break damage because they know you can't really choose Because you can't skip turns in the game. There's no, like, strategic depth there. It's just whatever order your team's in, that's the order that they attack. And it is what it is. And in a game where you get to decide who does the break damage, when the break damage is done, at what part of your character's rotation the break damage is done. Oh, I'm gonna break after my ultimate. I'm gonna break before my ultimate. You can't really do that in this. You can't sort of like, you know, work around the timing by using your own ultimates and stuff like that. But it's pretty clear. Not even close. And so that's the first little bit of misinformation that I want to get handled right off of the bat. The simple basis of HSR being a turn-based game with speed and no ability to skip turns makes Super Break and its existence in the break mechanic so much more simple and so much less strategic than its implementation here in Wuthering Waves. So let's just get that straight right off of the bat. Second, let's actually talk about the strategic uses of being able to decide when to use your break attack. Here is a perfect example of using a break attack very properly. And let me just show you an example over here, what it looks like when you don't use your break attack. We're just doing a demo over here in a fight against Crownless. And everyone knows that Crownless has a very special sort of attack that not really is interruptible. All you can really do is dodge. And it can be very annoying in his actual fights.
Off-tune level is now maxed out. We now have access to the parry. And we're just gonna, well, chill out and let him do his attack. I will say, the bosses here do no fucking damage. Yeah, like, you probably should be able to clear this with complete ease.
And now watch this.
Come on, do it. Do it. Come on, man. Here we go.
So, you all know that when he does this exact move over here, the tacit mark comes out, right?
Come on, man.
And then his wings ignite.
Here we go.
Bro goes absolutely crazy.
This is what the move looks like when you don't cancel it. You cannot attack him at all in the
He just beats your ass. We all remember this. It's all happened to us. We're kind of just like, damn, I wish that this could be over. Now, here's what it looks like when you're able to effectively use a tomb break ability.
break him, right? And I want to see if he's going to do his super annoying attack animation or if they've like sort of nerfed his moveset. Because right now he's just doing like very easy parryable stuff. I don't think like countering this guy in combat right now is too big of a deal. Not really too useful to use this mechanic at this point. Oh, here we go.
So, that's the same exact stance that he did, right? Kind of like bends down, the wings come out. That's the sign that he's going into super mode.
Yo, this is his big one. All right.
And you can just stuff it. And this is the trade-off for deciding to use the attack in this way. We all know that Tomb Break is going to deal a burst of damage. We all know that Tomb Break has a cooldown. And we all know that Tomb Break requires you to build up a whole meter again to use it again. And so the decision that I make in this fight is to reduce my DPS, reduce the damage that my team is dealing, because I'm delaying my Tomb Break. I have it available this entire time. And I just decide to hold on to the ability and not deal my damage so that I can use its interruption.
All right.
To skip this part of the fight. However, that means that my next Tomb Break, my next opportunity to use this is going to be delayed because I decided to use it. You could call it defensively. You could call it offensively. The better word is probably strategically here to deal extra damage. And that's the part of this mechanical depth. That's the part of the combat that I'm talking about is so great over here. Because I love the idea that there's a cooldown to it. I love the idea from its implementation over here that you can hold it indefinitely. Because that just means that there are some teams in the game where they don't have a lot of CC, but maybe they have a lot of damage. And so maybe this Tomb Break now becomes, hey, we know that your team is all about maximizing DPS, but it lacks a little bit of utility over here. And so maybe you could decide to use your Tomb Break or as a utility tool rather than a damage tool to get you through your fights, knowing that your team has other weaknesses when it comes to the utility department. And that, to me, is adding such a new layer of depth to the game that's not even slightly comparable to what Super Break did to Honkai Star Rail. Oh, great. Just break them and then deal more damage. And now this is, hey, you can break them, or you can deal more damage, or you can focus on, or you can focus on interrupting the enemy. There's so many different ways to utilize this, and there's going to be so many different strategies to employ it, depending on the type of enemy you are facing. Because there are a bunch of enemies in this game that have some pretty annoying movesets, that have some pretty crazy playstyles, that having an interruption in the middle of your rotation, even if it does cost you a little bit of damage, like fighting this guy. We all know what a joy it is to deal with the Lampy Lumen's triple jump.
Is it health gated,
right?
the attack?
We all know how much
Maybe
of a
he
joy
does
it
it
is to deal with that
Be,
thing,
like,
right?
broken at a time
Where he
or something
starts
like that.
going like this.
All right.
What if you had a Tomb Break skill to interrupt that? That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? But the thing is, there are other teams in the game, right, where against the Lampy Lumen, they've got no issues at all, right? An example of a team that doesn't struggle at all against the Lampy Lumen, for example, is the Mono Fusion team. This Mono Fusion team over here is entirely in the air when they deal damage. And so, it's no issue at all when you got Mr. Ice Rosia over here, the TD Ice version of Rosia, jumping around like a fucking maniac, not hittable, because everyone on this team can hit it. And so this team can just decide, we're gonna Tomb Break off cooldown. We don't care about using our Tomb Break as a utility tool. We don't care about using Tomb Break as an interruption tool. We're just going to use Tomb Break as a damage tool. Because this team over here is built in a way where the restrictions of the Lampy Lumen don't affect it at all. Hopefully, you're beginning to see from the way that I'm describing it and the way that the mechanics are listed out, the cooldowns, the buildup, all of that, there's a lot of depth over here. And there's going to be so many changes to the ways that our current teams are played right now once this new mechanic is put in. Because what I just described, this whole situation of damage versus utility, I think that's going to be a very, very, very important question and a very important ask that every team needs answered, because that's how the split is going to be based off of how this is. So, that's the mechanical angle. Now let's talk about some of the more specific nuanced effects. There are going to be shifting effects as well to off-tune. And this is where the 3.0, this is where the shilling, this is where the new mechanics, new region stuff is going to start coming in. As enemies' off-tune level builds up, certain resonators can inflict shifting on them. There are two types of shifting: tune rupture and tune strain. These two types cannot exist simultaneously. Only one can be on at once, and inflicting a second one removes the one that's already there. You can see there's a very distinct mark over there. Certain resonators can inflict the demon. It's only Linnae. And Linnae can decide whether or not she wants to be in this mode or this mode in the character skill screen. So that's essentially what it is. She interacts uniquely with Tune. That's pretty much it. However, there are some characters that get additional buffs or deal more damage if they hit enemies that have Tune Strain or Tune Rupture on them. And that's where Mornier comes in. Yes, some characters receive buffs in combat if they hit enemies with the proper type of Tune Rupture or Tune Strain on them. That's what you're seeing over here. And that's where Mornier comes in. Resonators who can respond to Tune Rupture Interfered can unleash one special attack on targets in this state. The cooldown of each Resonator's special attack on a specific target is calculated separately. So you basically get, the way that I would describe this is it looks like chain attacks from ZZZ. You break them, right? You inflict the special state, and then you go in. You can clearly see that Linnae broke them. Now you're onto Rover and you're doing a special damaging attack. I don't know. If you want to draw comparisons between Tune and like ZZZ's anomaly and chain attack systems, that makes sense to me, right? You can clearly see there are way more inspirations being drawn over here. However, you still get to strategically decide when to actually break the enemy, and that's going to be the main differentiator, because in ZZZ as well, with that stun bar, you kind of just, you can choose, but once it's filled, they're broken, right? So this is what it looks to me like this is like an implementation of chain attacks. I'm not sure how I feel about the fact that something that like this appears to be locked behind just 3.0 units. I mean, as you can see over here, this is just, maybe this is an off-field attack, actually. Maybe Rover's just attacking right now, and then Linnea's attacking with this off-field. That could be what's happening, too. But to me, it's sort of like, this sort of region lock does seem a little bit interesting to me. I'm not sure how much of a fan I am about it. We're going to have to see what the implementations are, because I'm going to be honest over here. Is this balanced in a way where if you don't do it, the damage feels good on the character? Or is it balanced in a way where if you do it, then the damage feels good? Because I just don't want... Let's just say I wouldn't want a circumstance where the character, let's just say Linnea, for example, if she doesn't trigger this, then the damage doesn't feel like it's good. However, let's also be honest, Linnea kind of has to trigger it though, so maybe it's not that big of a deal for her specifically, because it's literally built into her kit. So there's no way that she doesn't do one of these. We'll see. I think the main point of view that I'm going to have about this is that this appears to be incredibly fucking strong. This seems to me to be very, very, very strong. And it's just telling me that Linnea, as this character that's able to trigger both Tune, Rupture, as well as the other Tune, the fact that she's able to do both of them and can trigger both of these effects by herself is only leading me to believe that her value as like a meta unit is only growing more and more and more. Because she seems to be, again, there are resonators that can interact with it, but she's the only character that can inflict it. Other characters interact with it, she inflicts it. She inflicts it and also interacts with it as well. Because as you can see, this is her interaction. So she inflicts it, and then also applies its effect. If you kind of want me to say it in, like, Genshin terms, this is a little bit like a character being able to, like, bloom themselves. Where they, like, apply Dendro, and then the same character sort of, like, also applies Hydro at the same time. That's kind of like what this feels like, to be able to inflict and then also deal the mechanical damage at the same time. It feels a little bit overloaded. Now let's read the other side. Tune Strain Interfered. Resonators who can respond to Tune Strain Interfered deal additional damage to targets in this state. Damage bonuses increase if you have more resonators who respond to Tune Strain Interfered. So, Linnea applies Tune Strain Interfered and then also responds to it. Mornier only responds to Tune Strain Interfered. And so this is essentially a damage buff to your entire team that gets bigger with the more 3.0 units that you have on it. I don't like this very much at all. I'm just gonna be real here. I don't like this very much at all, because what this is telling me is that if you pair up all the 3.0 units together, you will stack up this buff, right? And so an optimal team is going to include Linnea, Mornier, and then a third DPS character. Because now you're going to have 3 Tune-strained interfered characters all stacking up these damage bonuses over here. I'm going to be honest. I'm waiting to see what these numbers are. I hope they aren't large. I hope it's like 5, 10, 15% or something like that. Because if it's like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, we'll have to see. Because then that always begs the question of, if these damage buffs are actually significantly large, if these damage buffs are massive, right, then what do the characters perform like without it? So you can see over here, I have a lot of skepticism when it comes to these specific parts of the integration. These character-specific 3.0, for now, specific mechanics to me, I don't really like them that much. However, I need to see what the numbers are. I need to see what the balancing is. Because yes, if the damage bonus is literally 5, 10, 15% all attribute, I don't care, right? That's effectively nothing. It doesn't really matter that much to get 15% all attribute damage. If you get 3 of them in the team, that's less than like a 4-cost Echo as a whole, right? However, if the faction buff that we're seeing over here is significantly large, then that's where I'm going to start sharpening my pitchfork a little bit. But for now, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic because I haven't seen any of the numbers. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. But yeah, as another note, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that the 3.0 units will be split in this way. You'll have one slot of units that can inflict either of the tune states and then also interact with them, but you're also going to have a subsection of units that can't inflict it, but they can interact with the various tune form. I would probably be of the opinion that Mornier probably interacts with both of these. It would be absolutely ridiculous if she only interacted with one of them. So I'm going to assume that the 3.0 units, they have both of these capabilities built into their kits. But if it says that, you know, okay. Resonators, Linné and Mornier can respond to both. Okay, so it seems like every single character, at the very least in 3.0, is going to be able to respond to both of them. I hope. If there's ever a situation where the character only responds to one of them, that's another reason to sharpen your pitchfork. Because that would be fucking crazy. If they released a unit that only responded to, like, Tune Rupture, or it only responded to Tune Interfere. So, let's just hope that whatever they do, they don't add any more weird, crazy restrictions. What I comfortably would like to see is if these gameplay mechanics start feeling a little bit absurd, I would like to see just like some sort of integration like this to the rest of the roster. I'm gonna be real here. If this is what I'm thinking, Rover over here just built up the gauge, right? And then just used their Tomb Break skill. And then after Rover used their Tomb Break skill, Linné then threw a grenade from off-field and then blew up the enemy. And that's what interfered is. If that's the case, if that's what occurs, can't you just, like, pop a bunch of different, like, outro skills or something? I don't know, right? Surely there's something we could do for, like, other characters where they just, I don't know, launch an attack at the enemy when it gets broken. Something like that, because I'm gonna be honest. This seems like, to me, something that maybe should have just been added to every single unit, just like Tomb Break. Right? Something that should have been added to every single unit, just like Tomb Break, as a mechanic. Launching an attack off-field, or just simply getting a damage buff from hitting a broken it. I don't really know. It seems like those are things that should already be built into the mechanic itself. I'm not sure why they necessarily need to be separated, but this is the flip side. This also allows them to add new depth to how teams are doing damage. And that's the unfortunate price, right, of differentiating builds. One of the things about a game, right, where you can grind out multiple builds on characters is that, unfortunately, you gotta grind out multiple builds on characters. And that's kind of annoying, isn't it? And the thing is that I'm just gonna be honest. I think this is going to open the door for team building and the types of damage that teams are doing and how you're going to actually build them, right? Because clearly, this is meant to be for characters that have good motion values in their kit. This gives you a damage buff. This one causes you to unleash a nuke from off-field. One of these is going to deal more damage than the other, but the version that's better is probably going to vary depending on the type of team that you're playing. That's fair to say as well. So that really is... This means that you're going to have more characters in 3.0 and beyond that can be played in multiple different ways in multiple different teams. And do these extra restrictions, do these extra, you know, potentially pay to win, show mechanics, team up bonuses, is that cost good enough to balance the variety that this is going to add to the game? And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is, I can't answer that question yet because I don't see the numbers, I don't see the balancing, and of course, we don't have the official kits yet to see how they're fully interacting with all of these things. And so, I'm just going to be in the mindset of cautiously optimistic, waiting to see the balancing and all of that, because I can see how it goes very, very, very well, but I can also see how this goes horrifically wrong. But I will also say, all things considered, I'm gonna round us back to the point that I was making at the start of this video. This is nothing close to Super Break. It's not even close to how Super Break works. So let's just make sure that whatever narrative we have about comparing this shit to Honkai Star Rail, or any of that, and reigniting any of this crazy Game of the Year mobile player's choice discussion, let's just stop it right here. Now, let's talk about some last minute sort of like cleanup items when it comes to off-tune. And this is something that surprisingly was not actually shown in the document. And that's actually going to be some of the stats related to it. So, you're going to have off-tune buildup rate, which is going to be a new stat. I don't know if it's going to be available on Echoes or where it's going to come from. It might just be like Echo skill damage, where you can only get Echo skill damage from weapons and, well, Echoes and set effects. You've got off-tune buildup rate. So off-tune buildup rate is essentially going to increase the buildup rate of... Yes, as you increase that stat, you'll fill this bar up faster. Yeah, it's pretty simple. And Mornier's gonna have a set where she's gonna heal an ally and then increase their attack based off of how much of the stat that they have. So that's already like a pretty interesting sort of Sonata set as a whole, considering that we don't know how you even get this stat. So maybe she just provides it with like her passive abilities. That would probably make sense, but who knows? Maybe this will show up as an Echo substat in 3.0. The next stat that we're gonna have is something called Tune Break Boost. And so what Tune Break Boost is it essentially increases the amount of damage that your tune attack actually deals, right? The Tune Break attack. So this is going to be a sub DPS set for Linné. And so you can see over here, right? Linné has the ability to take on a sub DPS mode where she nukes from off field, or a main DPS mode, right? Where her attacks deal more damage. So, as you're probably seeing over here, right? This is probably for her sub DPS form, because she's going to be able to buff a main DPS who's essentially supposed to be a tune break damage character and give them a shit ton of attack. So there you go. Those are going to be the two stats that appear to be directly interacting with this mechanic. Like I said before, we've gotten very little information for where they're going to come from, how we're going to get it, whether or not we can grind it or anything like that. But I'm pretty certain it's going to be an essential substat based off of the set effects that you're seeing over here. Increase attack based off their off-tune buildup rate. Grant additional attack based on their tune break boost. You're going to have some DPSs in the future that are really going to want probably both of those stats. Maybe just one of them, right? And then use this as a new method to deliver. And I'm going to be honest, right? When you look past the potential for some really, really predatory stuff, it is pretty cool what they're doing with the character kits. However, like I said before, I'm going to exercise some cautious optimism to look at the balancing, look at the numbers, and perhaps most importantly of all, what does Mornier look like when she can't respond to Tune Strained? But she can't respond to Tune Rupture. What does her performance look like there? What does Linné's performance look like when she's the only person inflicting Rupture or Strain on the team? When there's nobody else on the team to help her out? Because she's got a main DPS Sonata set as well, ladies and gentlemen, that gives or has no relationship to buffing. All it does is buff her damage, her basic attack, and spectral damage. And so, when that is what she's doing, well, guess what? She's probably going to use Tune Strain Interfered. But if she's the only one with it on her team, right? Because guess what the icon for Tune Strain Interfered is, guys? It's those 3 waves, right? Those 3 waves. What's the icon for this Sonata set? Linné's DPS one. It's the 3 waves. And so, when this buff over here scales based off of how many other resonators on the team can respond to Tune Strains, because she's only going to be one of 3, is she even going to have enough damage without having Mornier on her team as well? So that's the thing. I'm all about seeing what are the performance levels of these units when they don't have these team-up bonuses and stuff like that going on. What is it like? And if it's not good, and then with the team-up bonuses, it's incredibly good, like, oh, like game-breaking good, then I think we have a reason. Because now we're shipping out characters who are dog shit without their best-in-slot teams, broken with them. That's not really great for you. And that also leads you into potentially having, let's just be honest here, guys, the Zani situation, where She only works with one other unit. And even with that one other unit, she's not even that good. And that's just worse, isn't it? I'll say when it comes to these mechanics, Toon Rupture, Toon Strained, and all of that, is that Kuro Games has the opportunity to earn player goodwill that will probably be banked up and last for at least a couple of years. They have a massive opportunity over here. And this is what it is. Add an interaction to Toon Rupture or Toon Strained for every single unit in the game. If they just simply did that, just make it a baseline part of every single kit, that would earn enough player goodwill, I think, to probably have them running for the next 2-3 years. They're probably not going to do it. They probably should, I think, just in terms of like overall game balancing and stuff like that. But if every single unit got one of these, it would just, all the worries that I feel like could potentially stem from the player base regarding any of 3.0's new mechanics and new kits would dissipate instantly. It would just disappear instantly. And from what I'm seeing, the mechanics don't seem that crazy. Hey, unleash one special attack. Hey, deal more damage. They're like one line. This isn't... They're one line each. Deal damage. Buff your damage. Now they're not doing that shit for older units. It's too much work. Like I said before, it's literally one line over here. It's deal damage and get a damage buff. That's it. Anyways, that's just my take. Just a thought. Overall, I would say there's a lot of promise over here. There's a lot of potential. And I'm hoping that Kuro Games has learned some of the lessons from the negative statuses, the Spectrofrazzle situation, learned the lessons when it comes to team building and character kits. And it appears that they have really been experimenting a lot. And I think it can be very, very, very great. But like I said before, I've listed out all of the reasons for why I feel like there's a lot of potential crap pits in this situation. So I just hope that these developers keep them in mind as they move forward with development, and we don't end up with, let's just be honest here, I've already seen it in the chat, people can already see how this is might possibly turning into a Natlan situation, a Nod Cry situation, a Hexa Rai sort of situation, right? You're already beginning to see how those threads could be forming. Let's just hope that it doesn't, you know, actually come into reality. That'll be it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.